Welcome to the Marriage Puzzle Podcast with Julie and Thomas Hobby. We are marriage coaches who help couples with pain points about money, intimacy, and communication go from being overwhelmed to being secure in their marriage.
If this is your first time listening to us, thanks for checking out our podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and a review. Let's dive into this episode.
Welcome to week 3 of our Lack of series we're doing in October. Today we're going to be talking about the lack of forgiveness in marriage. And I read a quote this week that said, "Forgiveness is a beautiful word when you need it. It's an ugly word when you have to give it. But it's a bridge we all must cross, and it is certainly a bridge we should never burn down."
Yeah, it's a really cool quote. If you dissect it, then you'll see that it's exactly true how it's said. Just really cool to look at it that way and see forgiveness in that way. And we, talking about lack of forgiveness, we are going to talk about 4 ways that lack of forgiveness affects you first, individually, if you're the one not forgiving, and then how that in turn affects your marriage. And each way is going to affect you if you're not forgiving someone. That's going to be the root of it. And then it's going to continue on and start to cause even greater compounding issues throughout your marriage too, the longer it goes on. Mm-hmm. And so the first way we're going to that this affects you is it's going to start limiting your intimacy with your spouse. Think of it as you're building up a brick wall. And so every time you choose not to forgive them about something, then you're laying another brick. And that brick wall is just going to continue to get taller. Mm-hmm. It's going to continue to get thicker, like wider, until there are just so many bricks that your spouse can't get through to you, or you're not letting them in is really more of the appropriate way
you put
to
your
put
walls
it.
Up.
Yeah. So you're blocking them from getting in. And so you are really just isolating yourself from your spouse by not forgiving them for something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the second one is you become bitter. I kind of struggle with this. I say kind of. Okay, confession. I struggle with, just basically it's a broken record in your head. Maybe that keeps you grumpy. And so, if your spouse or just something happens and you just don't let it go and you don't forgive them, you're just kind of replaying that, right? Like, well, they did this or this happened to me. And it's like, I can't even relax my mind because it's just, like I said, a broken record. And then that affects your attitude and your thoughts toward, in this case, your spouse, and you become bitter. And it's not just, then in my experience, it's not just toward you as my husband. Mm-hmm. I become like grumpy to everybody. My kids feel it. I can carry over into other things that I'm trying to accomplish. And it's all due to just the lack of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Number 3 is you stop giving grace to your spouse. Last time I checked, we're all human. Mm-hmm. And that means we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to cause other people to get upset at some point. And as a spouse, when you're working on forgiving, then you have to learn at the same time to give grace for their mistakes and for their shortfalls. And one of the things, like the best ways I can think of to describe this is when you choose not to forgive your spouse for whatever it is, then you're basically kind of setting like a bar and saying, okay, this is the new bottom. Like anything that happens like beyond this, you're not getting forgiven for. Like that, because if I can't forgive you for this, I clearly can't forgive you for anything that goes, past this. And so it just starts kind of creating that mountain that they're unable to climb, or that brick wall from the first analogy that they're unable to get through to gain that forgiveness from you. And so when you stop giving that grace for the one thing that you haven't forgiven them for, it's going to lead you to say, like, I can't forgive you for other things as well. It's kind of this cyclical problem that keeps happening, and just keeps growing, getting out of hand.
And the fourth one is then when you have lack of forgiveness, like when you choose not to forgive, you ultimately are believing that you're better than your spouse. And that might feel good for a moment. You might feel like you're in control by withholding forgiveness, and that's, maybe feeds your ego or you're trying to prove a point. But control or unforgiveness never gives us moral authority in someone else's life.
That's good. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting how that, you get that feeling of like won the fight, but lost, like you're losing the war, right?
Right.
And so you by choosing not to forgive them, you're like, you may feel like, "Oh, great, I've got them in my control now. I can get them to do what I want." And that's just really counterintuitive. And so I love how that's put in there, that it doesn't give you the moral authority over their life to choose now. Like, okay, you have to do what I need you to do. So, so with all of those ways that it will affect you, we want to try and give you some ways that, you can kind of break this cycle as well. And so we've got 5 tips for this, of helping you break the cycle of lack of forgiveness. But keep in mind that these are just not in any specific order necessarily. They're not linear, so you don't necessarily have to start with the first one and go through the last one. They're just different ways that we think that these will help you to break that cycle. And you need to figure out, maybe for you, where you need to start and what order maybe you need to go in. Maybe if you need to do all 5 of them or just one. We just think that these are different ways that could help you out.
Yeah, even though they're not linear, just here's the cycle. We would say, stop adding to the wall, clear your mind, extend grace, offer forgiveness, and remember your why. And when you're offering forgiveness, we've talked about this a lot in our marriage coaching, but even on other podcast episodes, of starting with I statements instead of, you always do this or you never do this. And you're like attacking them. Are you really going to forgive them? Mm-hmm. Or they're not going to hear that apology because you just accused more. So if you really were hurt, sometimes it's hard to muster up the courage to forgive. And that's why I said, even myself, I forget sometimes. I can like let it go, but I don't always say I forgive you. And so I think, an example that you could try is, I was terribly hurt when you said this or when you did this, fill in the blank. But I'm willing to move beyond that if you'll work with me. And I forgive you and we're in this together, something like that. But it's like more of those I statements than you. And when you're remembering your why, you've got to think about the good things about your spouse. It's so easy, especially if you've been married for a while. The hard times.
Maybe more than 60 seconds sometimes.
Like we're at 16 years of marriage, and those hard times and those bad things that come in that you haven't, extended grace for, they pile up, and it's easy to just remember those. And like I was saying, you just get bitter and grumpy and you can stay there. But if you remember your why, which we have another whole podcast episode on way back when we did 15 lessons after 15 years of marriage. Mm-hmm. So we're talking a year ago. When we started this podcast, we launched with that series. And one of them was the 15 lessons was remember your why. Why are you in this relationship? Why did you choose to get married? Why are you still with this person? And go back to that. Because then if you're thinking more positively and finding those good things in your spouse, it is going to be easier to offer forgiveness.
And extend that grace, for the things that they're naturally going to mess up on, and that's okay.
And stop adding to the wall and clearing your mind and all these 5 things
right.
that you just kind of cycle back through.
I love that you said a second ago that offering that forgiveness takes courage. And I really think that's a key to focus on here is, do you have the courage to forgive your spouse? Because offering forgiveness puts you in a vulnerable place. You don't have your guard up anymore. You're tearing down that wall and you're saying, look, I'm an open book to you again. This hurt. I will forgive you and hope and pray that you don't hurt me in this way again. But it does put you in a vulnerable spot. So you do have to have the courage to do it. So really cool way to.
That might lead into next week. Maybe we'll talk about lack of trust.
Okay.
But let us know. We have 2 more weeks. We're going to do this series in October. And so if you're listening live or within the week, if you're staying up on our weekly podcast on Mondays, message us on social media or through our website, which Thomas will give you the details here in a minute. But let us know what's lacking in your marriage or what topic you want us to tackle. But yeah, maybe it'll be lack of trust after you forgive, or maybe why you have lack of forgiveness in your marriage. It might be due to lack of trust.
Right. Yeah. They could domino into each other for sure. Make sure you check out our website, marriagepuzzle.com, and you can schedule a free marriage coaching discovery call with us, and we can chat with you about how marriage coaching can help you. And make sure you go check us out on social media. If this is your first time listening to us, thanks so much for being here. We're on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Marriage Puzzle. And as always, we look forward to you joining us next week, where together we'll work on marriage one puzzle piece at a time. See you later.
Bye.